and this is a good transition because
Right.
one of the areas where the U.S. has been like kind of talking a big game and failing to actually deliver is on trying to establish any sort of a humanitarian corridor, along the Gaza border into Egypt in particular. And also remember, we've got American hostages that are held by Hamas right now. Tony Blinken acknowledged that. Might be the first time that we've actually had official acknowledgement that there are American citizens being held as hostages by Hamas right now. We also have hundreds of American citizens who are in Gaza. Now, the American citizens who are in Israel, the Biden administration has been working aggressively to charter flights to get them out if they want to leave. Not so much success or interest in terms of getting the hundreds of Americans who are in Gaza right now out of there. Let me give you a few updates from on the ground because this issue of the hostages that Hamas has taken, which is, brutal and horrific, what they are doing here. This is going to continue to be a huge issue for the American public and also very much for the Israeli public. We had the first hostage video released from Hamas. Let's take a look at that. So you can see here, this is actually a French-Israeli woman. They're showing her here, receiving treatment from whatever horrific injuries she suffered. You can see her. They also, in the video, which, obviously this is all like compelled speech. So keep that in mind as I'm reading the words. But she says here, I'm a prisoner in Gaza. They treated me and performed a surgery on me that took 3 hours and everything is fine. I only ask that you return me home as soon as possible. Return me to my family. Please get us out of here as soon as possible. She is 21 years old. Her family reportedly, obviously very relieved to see that she is at least alive, but in grave danger and in grave peril. And Saagar, there are hundreds, we now know, at least 200 hostages being held, innocent civilians who are being held by Hamas in Gaza and who are very much at risk at this point. Some of the most vehement protests within Israel at Netanyahu's government and their handling of this crisis have been from people who have family members who are being held right now or close loved ones who are being held right now as hostages. So this continues to be a horrific and emotional issue bubbling here under the surface, especially as Israel, bombs the hell out of Gaza. These hostages are also at risk. Of course, the blame lies primarily with Hamas for taking them in the first place. Let's go ahead and put the latest death toll that we have up on the screen here, both in terms of Israelis and in terms of Palestinians. In Israel, we have 1,400 confirmed killed, 3,400 injured. As of yesterday in Gaza, we had 2,778 killed, more than 1,000 of those, by the way, children, which makes sense because the population of Gaza is so young, and close to 10,000 injured. This is what is confirmed. This also, as we mentioned yesterday, the main hospital, which is in Gaza City, which is in the evacuation zone, already struggling, already overwhelmed with trying to deal with patients. Only the most critical patients are being treated at the hospital already. They are saying there is no way we can evacuate. It is just a complete impossibility. So incredibly dire situation there. At the same time, speaking about American words versus action, we've had this whole game of telephone basically about whether or not there's going to be some sort of opening at the Gaza border with Egypt. American officials indicating, we're working on it, it's going to happen. Back and forth between Egypt and Israel. Egypt saying that Israel would not commit to not bombing aid convoys coming in at that border, and that's why they've held back. We have New York Times actually spoke to an American family that hearing that there might be a possibility that they could exit through Egypt has showed up at the border along with scores and scores of other people. Let's take a listen to what that mother had to say about her experience. So you can see these are images of the Rafah crossing point that is, from Gaza into Egypt. As it says here, up to 600 Americans are in Gaza. And you can see this one family, a young mother and her young children. She's saying, I'm an American citizen. My husband is an American citizen. We were both born there. I'm a mother to 3 children who also have American passports and were born there. You can see the children there. They've never visited Gaza in their lives. And if you can imagine, the first time they visit, this war happens. The people who are still alive, those who haven't been bombed or lost their houses, they have to hold on and keep going with less food, water, and fuel. And you can see the situation is very, very dangerous. You see little kids with giant suitcases waiting at this border crossing. And you have another Jordanian citizen here hoping her children will be able to cross into Egypt, asking, what have these children done? Why can't they go safely to their country? Why are they still in Jordan? Why are they still in Gaza? Jordan is responsible for them. We're facing the possibility of death every second. Our situation is awful. So, this is the experience of people who have been waiting at this border. There were conflicting messages about whether or not it would be open, and now it seems very much less likely because, let's go ahead and show this, Israeli warplanes have just bombed again this Gaza Rafah crossing that leads, as I said, into Egypt. Israel attacked that crossing again yesterday, and the roads have been completely blown up. The idea of being able to pass any sort of humanitarian aid trucks into this area, virtual impossibility because of the damage to the roadways here. And at this point, they've struck this crossing multiple times. So very difficult to say. One of the goals of Biden and Blinken in the region is to try to come up with some solution for civilians and at least to try to get some American citizens out of there, if nothing else. And it seems like a virtual impossibility at this point.
Yeah, it really does. If we can throw the next one up there on the screen. I mean, they say the U.S. seeks Gaza aid in safe zones as Israeli invasion looms. And the thing is that where is the deconfliction? Where is the diplomacy? Israel is like, well, we're bombing it because Hamas is using it, or there's a tunnel network underneath. And I mean, maybe that's true. I don't know. About bringing Hamas weapons and all that. And even if it is true, it's like, well, why don't we negotiate an actual time period where these people can get across? It also demonstrates, once again, the intransigence of all of the parties that are involved here, and frankly, the outright disrespect to the United States.
Yeah,
I just want to say again, we have given Egypt $80 billion. Their regime does not survive without America. And we come to them, we're like, hey, can we get our citizens out of there? They're like, nah. You're not getting them out of there. Not unless you do a quid pro quo with Israel. And then our freaking Secretary of State is in Israel for 8 hours and he can't properly negotiate a border. What are we doing here? We have, I was just telling you while that clip was playing, I was like, I heard a lot from all these people about, American citizens left behind in Afghanistan and all this other stuff. Where are you now? These people are our citizens. It's like, are they to have some protection from their government? And the safe zone has failed already in South Gaza. Not only in terms of like the water infrastructure allegedly being turned on or any of that other stuff, not even in terms of the airstrike, but most importantly, just from a pure national perspective, I consider myself a nationalist. Our citizens are not being afforded safe passage by both parties, who we have both paid billions of dollars, and our Secretary of State is in the region. That's a failure already.
And he was made to look like a fool.
Yeah.
After Blinken met with Egypt's president, Sisi, he said it will be open. He said Rafah will be open. That's why so many people showed up at this border and are clamoring to try to get out. And he's made a fool of now in this situation. And obviously, in my view, American lives are not any more precious than the lives of the Palestinians who are suffering here. But in terms of, this idea, there's a different note being sounded and the U.S. is putting pressure and Biden's going to go and try to work out this Gordian knot, et cetera, et cetera. I mean, how is this working out? Even on the most minimal of asks of, hey, we kind of like our own citizens to be able to cross here. He's made a complete fool of.
Yeah, I'm not saying nobody is more precious, okay?
I know you're
not. But
I'd
say the government has a responsibility first and foremost to its own citizens. And so where is that? We got our people out of Israel. We are, flying people out of aircraft carriers. I mean, I just can't believe that it has come to this and that we, again, are being made fools of in this diplomatic situation. I mean, Henry Kissinger should be rolling, or he's not actually in his grave, but should be rolling around. If he was in his grave, it would be rolling around. Yeah, I guess he would be rolling around. You're watching this, from his ability at that time during the Yom Kippur War, and again, you can have a lot of criticisms, but he was an exceptional diplomat at that time in terms of keeping actual negotiating power with both of the parties, bringing the end to the conflict, and making sure that it didn't escalate to a full-blown nuclear war, which was absolutely on the table. The current diplomacy from the White House is so disjointed and foolish that it is making the prospect of broader war more likely. even more so, Krystal, something we talked about is they said they were going to do a humanitarian corridor out of Gaza, not for American citizens, out of Gaza.
In general, yeah.
Let's put this on the screen just to show you. Now that's over. Blinken now, quote, publicly opposes mass relocating Palestinians from Gaza to Egypt's Sinai Peninsula. He says, I have heard directly from the PA Authority, President Abbas, and from virtually every other leader I've talked to in the region. The idea is a non-starter.
Well, this is a very emotional issue for Palestinians.
I get that.
It's being seen as, you know, a second Nakba,
But
basically of, you know, okay, now we're being forced out of our homes. Again, this little strip of territory that we've been allowed to hold. So I think that was what was expressed to him.
I
of,
understand
like, this
that.
is a very emotional option that you put
I
on
understand
the
that from their point of view. And that is why we have to give an assurance from the most powerful nation on earth that that is not going to happen.
Yeah.
We have negotiated diplomatic point of view. We want you, listen, we want people to live. We want children to live. We want to make sure that this doesn't escalate into some full-blown disaster. We've had enough war already this year. We don't need another Bakhmut times 15, you know, in terms of what we're going to see. So, and this is where, you know, we got to say this about the Palestinians too. It's like, listen, I get it. You should be skeptical, but don't choose death for no reason. I mean, there's just no reason to be to voluntarily be like, I refuse to leave out of some sort of pride in their leaders, you know, Hamas and President Abbas. They're basically saying this is a total non-starter. Like, we have to at least come to some situation where people can agree that a military operation needs to take place in Gaza and Hamas needs to pay, and that some sort of mass civilian death does not need to occur. The Arab states are complete hypocrites. Just today, this morning, I woke up. King Abdullah says we will not take one Palestinian out of Gaza. And, you know, I mean, from their perspective, I get it. They're, you know what, 70-something% of their population is Palestinian. I've been to Jordan, you know, barely feels like Jordan according to the actual Jordanians. They're like, our country's been totally changed. We've all suffered. But the Egyptians, I mean, you know, the Sinai Peninsula is massive. We've had UN presence there for a long time. There's even American service members in the region. We can make something happen if we want to. To walk this all back, the Arab states themselves have not, you know, offered to do anything really except calling for a ceasefire. Like, on a humanitarian level, once again, I think, and this is the most frustrating part, the Palestinians are pawns. And that's just that's the most frustrating and difficult part.
I mean, people shouldn't be forced out of their homes, and the
think
indiscriminate nature of, I mean, you have, you know, evacuation orders for over 1 million people, many of whom can't go, have nowhere to go. You know, Gaza, it's this very small territory, you know, that's been said many times. And also only certain parts of it are developed. So the parts that are developed are incredibly densely packed. And the rest of it is just basically like open farm or agricultural land with no sort of infrastructure, no sort of facilities. So, you know, that in a sense makes the populated or places you can go in Gaza even less. And you know, Israel has made life in Gaza so miserable already that people feel like they have very little to lose. And I think that's part of the, you know, part of the mental calculation that's going on here, not to mention the like generational nightmare of the original Nakba and being terrified that that's exactly what they're facing once again, when you already have thousands of not only apartment buildings, but single family homes that have been blown up in this operation. So there was one other piece with regard to Egypt. Let's go ahead and put this up on the screen. I mean, again, it's just sort of like meaningless words. Egyptian presidency, Al-Sisi and Biden agreed the current situation in Gaza is extremely dangerous, needs to be de-escalated, no shit. To avoid widening the crisis in the region, they agreed priority should be given to protection of civilians and the entry of humanitarian aid to Gaza. Well, Israel just blew up the Rafah crossing, so how's that gonna work?
Well, they bombed, they didn't blow up the whole thing. Not in defense. They bombed nearby, which part of the issue.
Yeah. So no progress here, basically, in terms of any sort of humanitarian solution, protection of civilians, end of the siege, any of that, no real progress. And again, this is before the ground invasion even begins, if there is to be a ground invasion, which I guess at this point is a bit of an open question given the delay on that.
We don't know. Yeah, there's some indication. I don't see any scenario where Israeli troops do not at least, you know, enter for some period of time, especially after all the talk that's happened, also given the attack. I just don't think they could restrict themselves solely to ground or to air operations.
Yeah.
Which doesn't seem politically tenable.
Hey guys, if you like that video, go to breakingpoints.com, become a premium subscriber, and help us build the best independent media organization on the planet.
That's right. We're subscriber funded. We're building something new. We want to replace these failing mainstream media organizations.
So again, to subscribe, it's breakingpoints.com.